Hello and what is going on today, guys? Tomcat here and welcome back to the Forza Horizon 4 demo. Now, the topic we're going to cover today is how exactly to learn how to drift in Forza Horizon 4. Now, if you're new to the Forza series, if you're new to the Horizon series, this is more of a tutorial for people like that. If you've been drifting for a long time, yes, I know that this tutorial is probably not going to give you too much. I mean, you might pick up something here and there, but mainly this is for people that are new to it. So, the main thing is we are going to be using the switchback road right outside the festival, as well as the drift pad at the festival. So I'm going to go ahead and drift up the hill and talk about what we're going to be working on. Now, mainly what we're going to be working on is the actual act of power oversteer and then catching that power oversteer. We're not really going to focus on what I'm doing right now. What I'm doing right now is basically what happens once you put it all together. And the biggest thing is, once you put it all together, you'll be using a mixture of power oversteer, brake oversteer. You'll be using the e-brake. You'll be using the normal brakes. You'll be using the clutch. By the way, I recommend doing this with manual with clutch. You can do it with standard manual, but you have a ton more control if you're using the clutch. So that is something to think about. Now, if you haven't used manual with clutch before, it's honestly really simple. All it adds is one extra button press to your shifting that you just have to use at the same time. And some people are like, why would I use manual with clutch on a controller if I'm not using a wheel? And by the way, this tutorial more applies to people that are on controllers. I'll be doing a video as far as a wheel goes later, but like I said, the reason why you'll want manual with clutch, especially for drifting with a controller, is because you can clutch kick. We're not really going to be talking too much about clutch kicking in this video, because clutch kicking is honestly it's something more that kind of almost comes to you as an idea, as a technique, because once you realize what it is, once you realize that a rough shift is really just a clutch kick anyway, then it kind of makes a little bit more sense as to oh, I could do this now, or I could do this at a different time. But the biggest thing about, using the clutch is when you go to pull in the e-brake, you hold the clutch. And if you're holding the clutch, that gives you so much more freedom. So, here we are at the festival drift pad. So, once we're at the festival drift pad, what we're going to do is, and this applies to really any car as long as it's rear-wheel drive. And the reason why I'm not going to be doing anything crazy with this car is because it's a 1,000 horsepower rear-wheel drive converted Focus RS. I mean, it can do pretty much whatever you want it to do drift-wise. But what I'm going to do for this car is keep it in second, just drive around the circle. This will make you dizzy after a while, but ease into the throttle and then let off and catch it. And then go back to it, ease into the throttle, let off, and counter steer and catch it. So once you do that a few times and you get used to catching the car, and you can just let off the throttle and catch it, and let it gather itself back up, and then get back on the throttle, let off, and catch it. Once you get used to doing that repeatedly, you can start to blip a little bit. You can start to blip it and focus more on catching and returning to your, catching the car and then bringing it back, and then catching the car and then bringing it back. A lot of people, when they go to do it the first time, they do this. And they either spin out, or if you have the drift suspension, you're a lot less likely to spin out. But I honestly think you should practice without the drift suspension first, so you get a good idea of what you're working with. So what a lot of people do when they don't have the drift suspension is they do this. They do that because they go way too heavy on the power and then completely neglect any idea of counter steering. So once you've done this a few times and you're comfortable with feathering the throttle in second gear, try to go up to third. Now, this is going to be different depending on what vehicle you're in, but whether or not you can actually make it around this entire thing. And just try to basically use as little throttle as you can in the beginning. Make it a game of using as little throttle as possible, because if you can make it a game of using as little throttle as possible, then once you get to a higher powered car, it's not going to be a problem. A lot of people, when they learn in a higher powered car, they just get used to flooring the throttle everywhere and just basically powering through everything. But if you get used to it through weight transfer, on a lower powered car and with only partial throttle, it will really help a lot. Now, also to work on your like actual trajectory of where your car is going to be, focus on keeping that like right inside tire or right outside tire right on that line. If you can keep it right on that line, then you're going to really improve your accuracy, because that's a really important thing with this is accuracy. So once you've practiced that, and you may need to spend some time in this little drift circle to practice it, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. Honestly, that's probably the best place to go to work on it. Now, as far as the e-brake goes, because we are going to talk about the e-brake in this video, because everybody wants to know how to use the e-brake. And honestly, a lot of people, when they drive with, when they drive with manual without clutch, they end up developing this weird habit of using the e-brake, letting the revs drop, and then like that, and then waiting for the car to basically start back up effectively because they're stalling the car. And that, I mean, it can work because you're still like pulling the e-brake, but it's super delayed. It's super delayed. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to one of the tighter hairpins, because the tighter hairpins are are some of the best ones to use for this. And just get comfortable with using the e-brake. Get comfortable with thinking about what you're doing while you're using the e-brake. So honestly, when people have never done this before, what I say to do is just like hold the e-brake and give the car some free revs. Hold the e-brake, give the car some free revs, and just kind of let it come to a stop. You don't have to keep it on the road or anything. Just be super chill about it. And then once you do that, learn how, when you pull the e-brake and then you let go of it again, how the car hooks back up. And, you know, practice these little handbrake turns. Go back and forth. So don't put it in reverse, though. So get up to like maybe 40, 50 miles an hour, and then cut the wheel and rip the e-brake. Once you've turned around, go back the other way. Get up to about 40, 50 miles an hour. Rip the e-brake, go back the other way. And that will kind of give you an idea of where your control point is with the e-brake. You can do it faster, you can do it slower, it's up to you. But the main thing is learning where that limit of traction is. Now, once you've done that a few times, the next thing you want to do is take one of these hairpins. It doesn't really matter which one, as long as you have like a spot to do this. Basically, go from the outside of the corner, point your car towards the inside, grab the e-brake, and then let it off. Don't worry about, countering with the throttle or anything like that. Just think about grabbing the e-brake and the clutch, and then counter steering the car as you come out of the slide. So grab the e-brake and clutch, no throttle, and then just reposition the car. Basically, get your entry right, because if you don't get your entry right, nothing else is going to work. Nothing else is going to work, and the whole rest of it is going to just be effectively terrible. And you're going to wind up in the bushes or something. So grab the e-brake, let it off, and counter steer. You'll know what happens when you go too fast. Trust me. The car will let you know what happens when you go too fast. Once you've practiced it a few times, you can start to grab the e-brake and then start to feather the throttle. I went a little wide, but you can start to, like I said, you can start to feather the throttle a little bit after you grab the e-brake. So approach the corner from the outside, point towards the inside, let it off, counter steer, and then feather the throttle a little bit, and then just kind of let it go. You don't have to drift the whole corner or anything like that. This car has a ton of power, so it's got a ton of power, and it's got wide tires. So drifting this car, honestly, like, you have to really be mean to it, and you have to be in a higher gear. So once you get up there, just spin around and go back down. And as you do this up and down process, tap of the e-brake and clutch and feather the throttle. Little feathering of the throttle, and that's it. I'm going to do this a little bit lower RPMs because this car has a ton of torque, but just a little bit of a feathering of the throttle. And honestly, the Charger is a better choice to do this in, but we approach the corner from the outside, point to the inside, grab the e-brake and clutch, feather the throttle, turn in, counter steer. And honestly, you'll get accustomed to it after a while, and it'll become natural. That's the biggest thing, is that a lot of people think it's going to come instantly, and it doesn't. You really have to get accustomed to being familiar with where the car is and what the car is doing. But little grab, like, it's literally like an on-off of the e-brake and the clutch, and then just feather the throttle on the way out. You don't have to carry it down the straights or anything like that. Just approach the corner and e-brake and clutch. Again, That's what happens when you do it too late. That's what happens when you do it way too late. And also, that corner kind of falls away a little bit, so you have to kind of be prepared for that. But little grab the e-brake and clutch, and then on and off, feathering the throttle. And I'm not counter steering the whole time either. And I'll show you guys what happens if you counter steer the whole time. It's actually quite funny, because you grab the e-brake and clutch, and you counter steer the whole time, and you'll just basically steer yourself off the road. Literally. If you counter steer the whole time, you'll steer yourself off the road. So you have to have this balance between feathering the steering and the throttle. And even if you wanted to just pick one corner, like this hairpin, for example, and just do it over and over and over again, even taking the handbrake entry out of it. Like, if you wanted to take the handbrake entry out of it, approach it slowly in, like, say, maybe third, get about, I don't know, halfway through it, stab the throttle, and then just use that to practice your counter steer. That's, like, again, that's also perfect. Now, think about it this way. When you're, generally speaking, when you're counter steering, so when your wheels are, let's say, let's go to actually down, like, actually go down to the corner itself, park the car on the corner, and you guys will actually be able to see what I'm talking about. So let's imagine we're mid-drift, okay? We're going down the mountain. If you were like this, if your wheels were positioned like this, you would be on throttle. If your wheels were positioned like this, you would be off throttle, generally speaking. Now, there are, of course, exceptions to that, but it all depends, because it all depends on where you actually are, like, in the drift. But I'll show you guys. I'll call out exactly where my throttle position is and where my steering position is, and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. So let's go ahead and pull the e-brake, spin back around. We'll do this in third, I think. And throttle, counter steer, throttle, counter steer. So there was a little bit more throttle than I planned on, and to be honest, I was mostly, ever since the second half of the corner, I was flat, and I was basically just counter steering on and off and on and off. And the biggest thing is you have to feel, okay, am I closer to spinning out? If I'm closer to spinning out, I want to steer right. If I'm closer to straightening up, I'm going to steer left. So the closer you are to spinning out, the more you want to steer out of the drift. The closer you are to straightening up, the more you want to steer into the drift. Does that make sense? So go back the other way one more time. So closer to spinning out, steer out of it. Closer to straightening up, steer into it. Closer to spinning out, steer out of it. So that's the biggest thing. Remember that. The closer you are to spinning out, steer out of it. The closer you are to straightening up, steer into it. And once you get that concept down and you run it in your head over and over and over again, that should really, really help you in terms of like feeling out where your car is in relation to the slide. Now, if this helped any of you guys that are new to drifting, don't forget to let me know in the comments below, actually, if this helped you out. And in the future, I will definitely make more videos on tuning and stuff like that. But if you guys enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave me a like. Tell me in the comments below what you guys thought of it. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more. I'll see y'all next time. Talk to you guys later. I'm going to do one more run down the hill, I think.